thank you so much for coming on a very good weather in 3rd of December, which is strange, 33 degrees, sunny day. I am honored and privileged to introduce Rania Baashirah, and we will listen to her proposal for her Ph.D. dissertation. I will take this opportunity to thank the committee member, Dr. Rania Baashirah, Dr. Sarosh Patel, and Dr. Omar Abuzneid. And I will not forget to also thank the director of the program, Dr. Khalid Al-Waifi. Thanks to all the PhD students back there. And I hope that you'll enjoy the presentation. Please take notes for all of the questions. We'll have enough time and good time answering your questions. Thank you so much. And without further ado,
thank you, Professor. Good morning, everyone. Today, this is a PhD dissertation prospectus for the title SLEC, a novel serverless radio frequency identification protocol based on elliptic curve cryptography. I would like to thank Dr. Abdelshakour, my research advisor, Dr. Al-Waifi, the program coordinator, and the committee member, Dr. Faizapour, Dr. Patel, Dr. Abuzneid, and Dr. Abdel Fattah, and all the families and friends on the audience for being here. So I'm going to start the presentation with outline, starting by motivation, reviewing some of the existing protocols, contribution and proposed work, the work result, conclusion, and ongoing work. My motivation to this research, what brought into my mind about RFID, that that wireless sensor network has expanded recently to employ new technologies. This is to create low-cost, reliable, and secure communication network. And this happens to identify people or items using electromagnetic fields in the environment. This kind of RFID system is used in some business operations such as supply chain, access control, parking, product tracking, government, parking tolls and stuff. But it's not limited to business operation, it's also used in daily life activities such as cell phone, household, and automobiles. So this is a basic RFID system that consists of tags, small tags in the field, reader to read and request the information from the tags, and database server that's responsible for managing the data and storing it from the reader and the tag. The tag is a small chip that has antenna that's responsible for transmitting and receiving the signals from the reader, and a microchip to store and does all the calculations. So this is a real example of RFID tag, passive tags that's attached to the objects we're identifying. How the RFID tag processes the signals. It takes the power from the reader, processes it, and then sends it back as less in power to the reader again. So this is how the passive tag gets activated by the reader. So we have 3 different types of RFID tags: the passive tags, the active tags, and a type in between both, which is the semi-passive tag. The passive tag differs from other types from the power source, for example, that it gets activated from the surrounding signals, while the active tag has its own internal battery. The semi-passive is, of course, because it's in between, it has a small internal chip battery. The distance, another example, in the passive tag, the reading distance is only 5 meters, where it can reach up to 1,000 meters in the active tag. Some of the MIT projects, like IOTERA project, they implemented an active tag and tested it to that reach 1,000-meter reading distance. The cost of the passive tag, since it doesn't have a battery, is lower than the active and semi-passive, and also the The cost is low, and the size of the passive tag is very small. It can be just a sticker that's placed on the items. It can be a small capsules that can be inserted in any liquids or drugs, bottles. And the active and semi-active is much bigger, such as the one in EasyPass, because it has its own battery. The passive tag. In our project, we only use the passive tag that has limited resources. We saw from the previous slide that it doesn't have a power source, and it has some limited resources to do complex computation. So, heavyweight protocols such as public key cryptography, advanced encryption standard is not suitable for RFID passive tag. However, authors propose lightweight protocols using very simple operations, and this is commonly used in the current application nowadays. Why do we create and propose RFID protocols? To defend the RFID systems from different attacks. However, even though we have lightweight protocols, attacks are still detected in those protocols because it's simple to break out their operations. What are the security attacks that the RFID system has to defend? First, replay attack. If we have an intruder, it can eavesdrop to the signal from the reader to the tag or vice versa, and then replace it back in another session as a secure communication to pass the authentication or to obtain the tag information. Man-in-the-middle attack. An intruder in the middle can break out a signal, takes it, modifies it, and then sends it back to the tag as a legitimate signal, legitimate entity. Impersonate attack. The adversary can obtain the identity of either the reader or the tag and then start a communication channel between either or and act as a legitimate reader or a tag. Traceability attack. An adversary can trace back a signal coming from a specific tag, either to track its location, obtains its identity, or its secret keys. Desynchronization attack. An adversary can break the synchronous state between the reader and the tag to make the communication unavailable. Denial of service attack. An adversary can jam the communication network by too many requests to the reader, so leading the reader to be busy responding to those signals. So it's not, the communication at the end is going to be not available. Cloning attack. The adversary can still clone by a malicious device, clone the identity of either the tag or the reader and act as a legitimate one. So in order for the RFID system to maintain those, defend those attacks, it has to maintain some of the system requirements. For example, mutual authentication. The reader and the tag have to mutually authenticate each other and prove their identity to each other before they're sending their secret information or start secure communication. Confidentiality. We need to make sure that all the data transmitted and the messages transmitted in the communication channel have to be secure and confidential. Availability. We need to maintain an available synchronization state between the reader and the tag. Whenever the reader needs to request information from the tag or vice versa, the communication is available. This happened by maintaining, keeping the values in both entities to be synchronized. Privacy. We need to keep the ID, the location, and the secret key of the tag secret, so it cannot be accessed by unauthorized user. Forward secrecy. the values used in a current session, communication session, has to be independent, and the keys used have to be updated. So an intruder cannot obtain a current session value and predict what the next session values will be to do those calculations. So more than the lightweight and the heavyweight protocols, there is a new model that was proposed in the RFID system, which is the serverless. In the serverless, the reader and the tag communicate with each other, mutually authenticate each other away from the server. So the server job here is eliminated. For example, in healthcare, in drugs shipping, in patients' record, where we need some time to ship the drugs from a place to another, and the server is not available all the time. And we need to make sure that the information of the drugs is secure, and nobody can modify it, and then will affect patients' health. This serverless scheme, of course, because the major part of the calculation happens to be in the server, and the server job here, the server role is eliminated, the scheme arises many security issues because we have the pressure on the reader to do all the calculations and the security computation. So as a solution for that, people came up with a lightweight serverless protocols, and the outcomes of that lightweight operation are still vulnerable to security threats because of their simple operations. One of the secure algorithms that can be used in the system and used actually is the elliptic curve cryptography. The equation of the elliptic curve satisfies y squared equals x cubed plus ax plus b. So this type of algorithm is one of the public key cryptographies for low constraint devices such as RFID passive tag. It's similar to RSA, which we all know is one of the most secure algorithms, but the difference is the key size. Since, for example, 256-bit key in elliptic curve is equivalent to 3072, which is even not commonly used nowadays. The idea behind the elliptic curve security that it's easy to calculate their operations and values, but it's hard to get to be factored back to the original values. So we have done an exhaustive study on the available and recent RFID mutual authentication protocols using the passive tags. So we came up with a classification which is the first to classify the RFID mutual authentication protocols based on the complexity of the operations the tag has to perform. Those categories we classified to heavyweight, simple weight, lightweight, and ultra lightweight. So I'm going to give you a brief description of each category protocols. Wanda Salma in 2014 came up with a session-based authentication protocol, A and B. The protocol is based on symmetric encryption, the advanced encryption standard, and data encryption standard. So even though, due to their public key and symmetric key encryption, their protocol is resistant to major attacks. However, it's heavyweight on the passive tag, and it's not compliant with EPC, the Electronic Product Code, Class 1, Generation 2. This standard is defined by EPC Global Incorporated that defines the standard of the tags, the RFID tags, communication. Yao and others in 2016 proposed the reviving under DOS attack, the denial of service. So from the name, we can assume that the protocol defends the denial of service attack by powering up the tag to do the public key cryptography. So the more power, the more signals in the network coming from the denial of service attack, the more power the tag gets to do the public the public key operation. So it's secure against most startup attacks. However, it's still heavy weight and not complying with the APC standard. The second category is simple weight protocols. So it's less heavier. It's lighter than the heavyweight protocols, such as for Rash in 2014 proposed a mutual authentication protocol based on elliptic curve. His protocol was based on the server public key to provide privacy and then create the authentication message. So he tries to avoid breaking the system privacy. His protocol was secure against most attacks, but the computation cost is still higher. Zhang and Qi in 2014 also proposed efficient mutual authentication protocol to enhance the patient medication safety using the elliptic curve algorithm. So it involves one more scalar addition than other elliptic curve protocols, and it's secure and resulted better performance and resistance than other elliptic curve-based protocols. However, the challenge is this protocol, even though it's better, it's the best among the elliptic curve, it still has computation cost, higher computation costs. The lightweight protocols, Das and On, propose secure and efficient authentication scheme using a pseudo-random number generator. So the idea of their protocol that involves updating the secret key to provide a strong privacy. And it doesn't use the tag identity, otherwise it's using only the tag identifier. The protocol is lightweight because the operations used are very simple, such as the pseudo-random number for low computation. However, it's noted in the protocol that it doesn't provide backward secrecy. Matita and others in 2016 proposed a serverless authentication protocol. So in their protocol, they assumed a secure channel in the setup phase, but it was only serverless in the authentication phase. So the server is still available in the beginning of their protocol. So their protocol is based on synchronized session key to create a hash message authentication code. Even though it's secure and it's serverless, however, it's not secure enough because the hash message authentication code can easily be broken with brute force attack. Also, they noted that their protocol is not secure against denial of service and desynchronization attacks. The last category is ultra lightweight protocol. Sanderson and others in 2015 proposed another serverless, a secure tag search serverless protocol using very lightweight operations such as XOR, pseudo-random number, and the concept of noise tag to provide untraceability. The protocol is low cost, using very low operations, but the tag has to store all the reader information, which arises scalability problem. Chin and Huan proposed lightweight authentication protocol using rotation operators to form a secure permutation. The protocol is also lightweight, using only permutation operation, but it was noted in their protocol that it's partially secure against traceability and desynchronization attacks. So here is a part of our table we conducted in the review, mentioning some of the protocols we reviewed in the paper. So we noticed that the elliptic curve-based protocols have higher in-between medium tag overhead, and it's one of the public key secure algorithms. but it's still lower than the public key cryptography, which is not suitable for passive tags. We also compared the security resistance of all the protocols. We came up with elliptic curve-based protocols are secure and provide security against all the major attacks that threaten the RFID system. The last table shows maintaining the system requirements. Elliptic curve-based protocols maintains all the system requirements needed to be to defend RFID attacks. So we came into the contribution.
What does the star mean in that previous?
It's not applicable.
What does it mean?
So they didn't test their protocol
So no
against.
information.
Yeah, no more, not enough information
So
stated.
this is based on whatever they claim, right?
Yes.
Whatever they, not your own assessment, whatever they suggest.
Some of them, based on our study to other papers, we came into conclusion, but the protocols we couldn't come into conclusion of being either resistant or not resistant. We had to put the star.
Can you bring the previous slide?
This one?
Yes. So you're saying that there are some protocols looking at cloning. So how did you test cloning? There are devices in the market for $10 that can clone RFID tags and near-field communication, NFC. For $10. How did you test your protocol against cloning?
Okay, so for this protocol, because we only did the review, we didn't do the testing ourselves. So the cloning was tested by verified crypto tool in the paper itself of the proposed protocol. So in this case, we wrote that it's resistant to cloning. I mean, we did not do the actual testing ourselves.
You didn't do the testing, so how did you conclude this?
This is like this. This is a review, like anybody does a
No,
review.
that's your work, right?
Oh, no. This is just a review. This is a comparison.
Okay. I thought that this is.
Oh, no. We still
This is
wait.
a standard review
No.
writing,
I
right?
thought that this is your report.
No.
You said
This
mine,
is the
so-
elliptic curve based
Okay.
protocols.
So here starts the work.
Yeah. So the contribution of our proposed work, the challenge and the major challenge of all the security protocols is to provide a highly secure algorithm within the capability of the passive tag to perform. So our goal was to provide a serverless protocol maintaining and resisting all the attacks and achieve security requirements and within a reasonable compatible computation complexity. Our contribution in this work is to propose a serverless authentication protocol for mobile RFID systems. We assume an insecure channel between server reader and the tag, and this is the first to propose an insecure setup phase in RFID protocols. We were able to establish an autonomous communication between the reader and the tag. We provide a secure mutual authentication using elliptic curve cryptography. We reduce the communication channels in the network by employing a group key. And we also propose a recovery mechanism to retrieve a compromised tag in the network. The elliptic curve algorithm we used in our protocol is based on Diffie-Hellman algorithm. So I'm going to explain briefly how the Diffie-Hellman algorithm works. If Bob and Alice need to communicate with each other, each one will choose a private key as beta and alpha. Eve is able to have all those information about their communication and their curve parameters. Bob and Alice will compute public key by multiplying the private key with a point generator. and then they will exchange the public key only of each other. Eve, in his turn, will have access to the public key transmitted. Computing the secret key is based on the private key that has not been shared and the public key that was transmitted. So Eve is not able to compute the shared secret because he doesn't have an access to the private keys. So this is a very basic way of how the algorithm works. In SLEC protocols, we have two phases, setup phase and authentication phase. The setup phase, we can tell the setup phase is also a renewal phase. So an example, if a truck full of drugs is leaving from Washington, D.C. to Connecticut, having all tags, passive tags inside. In the renewal phase, our tags are able to renew the values through any checkpoint during the route from point A to point B, because we have a secure setup phase. So the setup phase is not an issue anymore. So now I'll describe the protocol briefly. In the setup phase, we have the tag storing the server public key in the point generator. The tag will choose a private key, will compute a public key the same way as we explained in the Diffie-Hellman, and then compute message 1 by his private key and the public key of the server. It will send M1 to the reader. The reader will have the same values stored, and then compute the same private key, public key, and message 2. The reader will send message 1 and message 2, forwards it to the server. The server, in turn, will extract the public key of each reader and tag. The server will generate tag information that has the tag identifier, timestamp, and group key, and will generate tag list that has multiple tag information for the reader. The server will compute hash values of reader public key, tag public key, and then to transfer securely the information of the tag and the tag list. So the server will send the tag list to the reader using a hash value of the reader public key and transfer the values of the tag information to the tag using the tag public key. So the idea here that only the authorized reader is able to compute this hash value, and only the authorized and legitimate tag is able to compute the tag public key, and then to generate the values with it. So here comes the authentication phase. In the authentication phase, the server goes completely offline. So we only have the reader with the values stored in the beginning, and the tag with also the values stored from the previous stage. The reader will generate private key, public key, and then compute two messages. One message has the group key, the hash value of the group key. The second message that has the public key XORed by the timestamp. We generate those two messages. First, the hash value of the group key is to validate the group we need to request. So since we have too many tags in the network, we don't want all the tags to respond to the reader request. So only the tag able to validate the first message will able to execute the rest of the protocol. After validating the group key, the tag will also compute the private key, the public key, and then the hash value of the identifier with all the previous messages, message 2 and 3, and the public key of the tag. And then the tag will go into the update phase. Message 3 and 4 is sent to the reader. The reader will extract the public key of the tag to compute the same message, the hash value in message 4. So if the reader was able to validate message 4, the hash value, using the previous messages and the identifier that was sent by the server in the beginning of the setup phase, and was able to correctly and successfully extract the public key of the tag, then this reader is able to validate message 4 and then authenticate the tag. In order for the tag to authenticate back the reader will go into the update and compute the hash value of the extracted public key of the tag.
So the most complex operation is calculating the hash.
It's one-way hash, so it's not a cryptographic hash. So it's a very simple operation. So if the tag was able to successfully validate M5, then reader is authenticated.
Okay, can you bring the previous slide? Okay. How do you demonstrate that this is work correctly?
Okay. So from the other previously proposed elliptic curve protocols that was available and published in many journals and conferences, we only employ the elliptic curve the way it works in other protocols to provide the same security level. We did not change the algorithm itself. We only
This authentication process.
Yeah, the authentication is available using the same concept of the private key and public key. We did not change or add more parameters. We only employed the group key just to narrow the responses in the first step of the tag. And we also only employ the timestamp just to defend the system from different attacks when the timestamp matches.
Let me help you out. You are writing a Python code for simulating this algorithm with the other three algorithms, which is a standard way for testing algorithms.
Okay. Okay. You are making some change, but verification can be done by 3 ways. Okay. The first one is testing, that probably you are doing. It
Yes.
takes a limited number of cases and test them and show that they are working correctly. And actually also the companies are doing the same, and they put the product in the market. After a week, they have a batch. Okay, so that's, of course, these are huge systems. The second way is an analytical or mathematical method that you can prove mathematically it is working. The third way that I just want to bring to your attention, all cryptographic protocols can be tested for correctness using formal verification. There's actually a tool that's called ProVerif, and this has been used extensively in literature, and it's based on a language which is called high calculus. So possibly you can do this and show, because there are 2 aspects of any correctness and performance, which is the energy you are using, whatever it is. So that you will demonstrate, but a stronger demonstration of the correctness of a protocol, unless it is exactly similar to other protocol and the others are also claiming that it's correct. So that maybe you want to look at this, the ProVerif. It's an existing tool. It might not be that easy to use, but you can look at it and try to demonstrate and use it and show really it is correct.
Okay.
Did any of our students use it before the program?
Yes.
So
Actually, Majid Shamar is doing his presentation today,
Okay. Yes.
and you might want to attend and see that part of his presentation.
Sure. The analysis of our protocol based on the security resistance. We assume, because we're still in the process of testing the protocol and then take into consideration Dr. Elate's suggestion, that we assume the protocol is resistant to replay attack. So in the replay attack, we have freshly generated private keys in every session and the timestamp. So even if an adversary tries to replay a current message in the following or next further messages, it's not able to pass the authentication because the timestamp will not match and the values used in a previous communication are different because we have independently generated private keys. Man-in-the-middle attack. Our protocol is resistant, assumed to be resistant to man-in-the-middle attacks because the messages involve validation in every step. So if an adversary tried to modify the message, it's not past the validation by the other receiver. Traceability attack. So since we have employed the group key and then used it in the first message of the authentication phase, all the tags belongs to the same group will respond to the reader request. That creates confusion to the adversary when tracing a specific tag. The security resistance, impersonate attack. Our protocol is assumed to be resistant to impersonate attack because it's not likely for an adversary to obtain the private key of either reader or the tag to start the communication. So it's not possible for an adversary to copy the identity of a legitimate reader or tag. Desynchronization attack. Our protocol SLEC involves updating the values and keeping in mind the old and new values, the new updated values. So in case of an adversary to break the last updating message, so the tag is still able to be identified by the reader if the old message is used or if the values gets updated or they're still the same as an old one. Denial of service attack. So since generating the values are independent, so there is no synchronization between the secret keys, which cause the denial of service attack to be unlikely to happen. So the results of our protocol, we compared SLEC to other serverless protocols. Some of the other protocols does not provide or is not applicable or has not been tested for the man in the middle, for eavesdropping, or for denial of service. By assumption, theoretically assumption, proposed SLEC maintains all the security resistance of what we mentioned, the security attacks.
So you have proved that through levers. You put scenarios.
It's just scenarios, but the actual testing is still being done with Python to come up with simulation, and maybe I will consider some of the suggestions to relate. Yes. Maintaining the system requirements. Mutual authentication. We could successfully prove that our SLEC protocol provides mutual authentication by extracting the public key successfully of each other and then calculate the hash value of the authentication messages. So reader and the tag can successfully prove their identity to each other. Confidentiality. All the messages we used from 1 to 4 in our protocol are confidential. They're encrypted either by a hash value or timestamp or per public key. Integrity. The messages in SLEC protocols involve digital signature coming from the sender, so that proves the integrity of the message when received. Forward and backward secrecy. Since as we mentioned that generating the private keys is independent, so from the reader and the tag, so it's not likely for an adversary to predict the next values in the communication or the previous one because they're not related to each other. Anonymity. We're not using the EPC, the electronic product code itself. So we're not using any of the secret information of the tag. We're only using tag identifier here. That gets updated and changed in every session. So we're providing an anonymity of the tag to be identified or tracked. Availability. So our protocol provides recovery mechanism through the renewal phase, or what we call the insecure setup phase. This makes our system available at any time, at any point, because the tag is able to be identified even if the server is away during the route of a mobile RFID system. Scalability, since we have combined tags into group of tags, so even if the system in large scale RFID, it's easy to identify tags among groups because we're minimizing the overhead on the reader to do calculations among all the tags available in the network.
How you are doing the grouping? Space grouping?
It's numbers, no. Like, what do you mean?
I mean, like, you have in the warehouse, like, you have 1 million items, and you have in the trunk 1,000 items. So how are you creating the grouping?
So, good question, but the grouping will come into, the reader will have a number of tags. Every time the network, increases. So if we have, our testing is on only 100 tags. So if we have 200 tags, we're still limited the group into 50 tags. Every time the network gets bigger and bigger, because we have too many readers in the network. If we assign number of tags in each reader, that will minimize the overhead on the RFID than just trying to identify 2 tags among 1 million or hundreds of thousands of tags.
Did we look at cloning?
The cloning attack?
How is the purpose
Okay, one of our Ph.D. students, Jeannie Grady, has some interesting work on cloning.
Okay, I will consider that. Definitely. So we compare SLEC into the same serverless protocols from the previous table. SLEC provides, maintains the system requirement, all the system requirements needed to defend those attacks, while other serverless still lacks to some of the features in the system requirements. So, talking about serverless RFID, very secure, maintaining all the system requirements, seems to be too good to be true. However, we need to trade off the computation and to just provide a highly secure serverless protocol. So for the fairness of our comparison, we did not compare SLEC into only the serverless protocols. We also included some of the elliptic curve-based protocols in our comparison. So in the serverless protocol, the security is low, however, it's serverless. In the proposed SLEC, the security is high and it's serverless. Other elliptic curve protocol did not provide a serverless option model, but we did. However, if we look at the operation overhead on the tag, we have a comparable cost to the other elliptic curve. We did not increase the overhead on the tag to be heavy. So still the tag can process and execute the algorithm.
It should be server-based, serverless, and server-based.
When we go to the communication cost, we have an assumption of the storage amount of each point, the point generations, the scalar, the output of the hash, applying the same assumption on other elliptic curve and SLEC. We can tell that SLEC provides the least communication.
What is this? What's the unit? 149 what?
Bits.
Okay.
So, sorry, it's bytes. Because we applied the storage of, for example,
So
the
this-
point, the output of the hash from the other computation and the timestamp. The tag will only generate 83 bits in messages. The reader will generate 66 bytes in messages, and then the total communication will come up to 149. Because other elliptic curve involves more scalar multiplication and addition that's heavy on the passive tag to perform. So we did not include any addition, scalar addition. It's only coupled scalar multiplication. So as a conclusion of our work, we propose a security algorithm. All the protocols in the available, they propose a security algorithms at a minimal cost, but the operation are still exposed to security breach. So we propose SLEC that uses elliptic curve that's very secure using based on Diffie-Hellman algorithm. SLEC protocol is secure against different security attacks that simple protocols suffer from. The reader is completely capable of authenticating and identifying the mobile tags under an offline server. The grouping mechanism was introduced to reduce the computation overhead on the reader side that elevated from the elliptic curve computation in large-scale network. We introduced a recovery mechanism that any compromised values can be soon renewed at any point from the server and the network to retrieve the tag and protocol privacy. Ongoing work. We're trying to improve and extend our simulation results. So we're trying to reduce the computation cost to come up with better results, include more comparison measurement with the other available protocols, compute the running time through Python simulation to come up with graphical comparison with the other protocols. And of course, including some of the cryptography testing tools to come up with actual results. These are some of the publications we conducted about the RFID topic and the serverless and the elliptic curve algorithm.